Imagine you're standing in line at the grocery store when some entitled teenager walks up to you and literally demands you hand over your cart, not asks politely, not makes a mistake, demands your groceries like you're his personal shopping service. When you refuse, because obviously, his mother storms over screaming that you're the problem. She calls 911, tells them you're threatening her family, and demands you be arrested immediately. Here's the plot twist that broke the internet. You're not just any random shopper. You're the chief of police. This actually happened in suburban Chicago last month, and what unfolded next is the most satisfying dose of instant karma you'll see all year. But before we get to that sweet moment of justice, you need to understand just how deep this entitled family's delusions really went. Because this story starts with stolen groceries, but it ends with a viral video that got 47 million views and completely destroyed one of the most arrogant families on social media. I'm about to tell you exactly how Police Chief David Jackson went from buying ingredients for his wife's anniversary dinner to accidentally exposing the most entitled family in America, and why their reaction made them internet famous for all the wrong reasons. Chief David Jackson had exactly 37 minutes to get home, help his wife finish cooking their anniversary dinner, and pretend he hadn't completely forgotten to pick up the special wine she'd specifically requested for their 25th wedding anniversary celebration. He stood in the wine aisle of Whole Foods in Elmhurst, Illinois, desperately texting his wife Sarah while trying to decipher her very specific instructions about the 2019 Pinot Noir from that vineyard we visited in Sonoma. You know, the one with the yellow label. David had been chief of police for the Elmhurst department for 8 years, but right now he felt like a rookie trying to defuse a bomb. Sarah had been planning this intimate dinner party for weeks. Her sister was driving down from Milwaukee. Their college friends were coming, and David was about to show up empty-handed because he'd spent the week dealing with budget meetings instead of wine shopping. At 52, David Jackson was the kind of police chief who still walked the beat, still knew every shop owner by name, still got invited to high school graduations and little league championships. He'd grown up in Elmhurst, played football for the high school team, and came back after college and the police academy because he believed in community policing done right. What he didn't believe in was using his position for personal gain, which is why he was standing in the wine aisle in jeans and a Cubs t-shirt, wallet in hand like any other customer, trying to figure out the difference between a $1.30 bottle and a $300 bottle. That's when he heard the voice behind him. "Excuse me, hey, you." David turned around to see a kid who couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17. Tall, expensive haircut, wearing a designer hoodie that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. The boy had that particular look of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life, the kind of dead-eyed confidence that comes from absolute certainty that the world exists to serve you. "Yeah," David replied, keeping his tone neutral but alert. 28 years in law enforcement had given him excellent radar for trouble, and this kid was setting off every alarm he had. "I need your cart," the boy said, gesturing casually at David's shopping basket like he was pointing out a shared piece of property. David blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your cart. I need it. My mom's having people over and she sent me to get stuff, but all the good carts are taken." The kid looked David up and down, taking in his casual clothes, his beat-up sneakers, the way he'd been carefully checking prices before putting items in his basket. "It's not like you're buying anything important anyway." For a moment, David was too stunned to respond. In nearly 3 decades of police work, he'd encountered every kind of criminal, every type of entitled civilian, every brand of disrespect, both subtle and overt. But this casual assumption that he could just demand another person's property because he wanted it, this was something new, son. David said, his voice carrying just a hint of the authority that had made him the youngest police chief in Elmhurst's history. I think you might be confused about how stores work. You get your own cart. You shop for your own groceries. You don't take other people's stuff. The kid's face flushed red. Don't call me son. And don't tell me what to do. You don't know who you're dealing with. David felt that familiar tingle of awareness that had kept him alive through 2 decades of patrol work. Something was very wrong here, and it was about to get worse. You're right, David said calmly. I don't know who you are, but I know these are my groceries, and I know I'm keeping them. That's when 17-year-old Brandon Mitchell made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. He reached out and tried to grab David's cart. David's hand shot out and caught the cart handle, stopping the attempted theft cold. The kid stumbled backward, shock and rage replacing his earlier confidence. Don't touch me, Brandon shouted, loud enough that other shoppers started turning to look. Security, this guy just assaulted me. And that's when David met Linda Mitchell. She came around the corner like a tornado in Lululemon leggings and perfectly highlighted hair, clutching a phone in one manicured hand and a designer purse that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. What did you do to my son? She demanded, pointing an accusatory finger directly at David's face. Ma'am, your son tried to take my cart. David explained, keeping his voice level and professional. I stopped him. That's all that happened. Liar. Linda shrieked, her voice echoing through the entire store. Brandon would never steal anything. You probably grabbed him first. You probably threatened him. She paused, really looking at David for the first time. Her eyes traveled from his face to his casual clothes to his modest shopping selections, and David could see the exact moment when her assumptions crystallized into something ugly and familiar. I know exactly what this is about, she hissed, stepping closer. You people think you can just intimidate decent families and get away with it? Well, not in my neighborhood, not in my store. David felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. He'd experienced racism before, of course, subtle and overt, professional and personal. But something about Linda Mitchell's absolute certainty that she was in the right, that he was automatically in the wrong, that she had the power to make that determination and enforce it. It was breathtaking in its audacity. Ma'am, David said carefully, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here. The only misunderstanding? Linda cut him off, her phone already in her hand. Is you thinking you can threaten my family in public and just walk away? Brandon, record this. I want evidence when the police get here. Mom, maybe we should just... Brandon started, apparently having second thoughts about his brilliant cart stealing strategy. Record IT, Linda screamed. Brandon pulled out his phone with shaking hands and started filming as Linda dialed 911. David watched this unfold with the surreal detachment of someone watching a disaster in slow motion. He could end this right now. Flash his badge, identify himself, watch these people's faces as they realized they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was professional curiosity about how his own department would handle this situation. Maybe it was the educational opportunity of seeing exactly how some citizens viewed police work when they thought they were in control. Or maybe, and this is what he would tell the disciplinary review board later, maybe he wanted to see just how far this woman's sense of entitlement would actually take her. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was clear through Linda's phone speaker. Yes, I'm at the Whole Foods on York Road and I need police here immediately, Linda said, her voice dripping with the kind of dramatic urgency usually reserved for actual emergencies. There's a black man here who grabbed my teenage son and tried to steal from us. He's being threatening and aggressive, and I'm afraid for our safety. David closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Linda was smiling with the satisfied expression of someone who just played what she was certain was a winning card. They'll be here in less than 5 minutes, she announced to the growing crowd of shoppers. And when they get here, you're going to learn that there are consequences for terrorizing innocent people. David nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. I imagine there will be consequences. He had absolutely no idea how right he was. Officer Kevin Murphy was 3 blocks away when the call came over his radio. Domestic dispute at Whole Foods, possible assault, black male suspect, requesting backup. Murphy had been working patrol in Elmhurst for 12 years, and he knew how these calls usually went. 9 times out of 10, black male acting suspicious meant black person existing while white person feels uncomfortable. But protocol was protocol, so he responded. What Murphy didn't expect was to walk into the store and immediately recognize Chief Jackson standing calmly next to the wine display, while an agitated white woman paced around him like a shark circling prey. Murphy felt his blood pressure spike. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 23. I need a supervisor here immediately. Copy that, Unit 23, problem. Murphy looked through the store windows where Chief Jackson was now surrounded by at least 30 shoppers, all holding up their phones, while Linda Mitchell continued her dramatic performance. You could say that, Murphy muttered. By the time Sergeant Williams arrived as backup, the situation inside had reached peak chaos. Through the windows, they could see Chief Jackson standing perfectly still, hands visible, expression calm, while Linda Mitchell gestured wildly and Brandon continued filming everything. Sweet Jesus. Sergeant Williams breathed. Is that Chief Jackson? Yeah, and he hasn't identified himself. Why the hell not? Murphy was wondering the same thing. Chief Jackson could have ended this with a simple badge flashed 20 minutes ago. Why was he letting them dig their hole deeper? They were about to find out. Murphy pushed through the crowd of phone, wielding shoppers that had gathered around the scene. Everyone was recording now, sensing that whatever was happening was way more interesting than their weekend grocery runs. Excuse me, Murphy called out. I'm Officer Murphy, Elmhurst Police. I understand there's been some kind of incident. Linda spun around with the desperate energy of someone who'd been waiting her entire life for this exact moment of vindication. Thank God you're finally here, she gushed. This man assaulted my minor son and tried to steal our groceries. He's been acting threatening and suspicious the entire time. I demand you arrest him immediately. Murphy looked past Linda to Chief Jackson, who met his eyes with the slightest raise of his eyebrows. Murphy had worked under Chief Jackson for 8 years. He knew that look. It meant, watch this, sir. Murphy said formally, I'm going to need to ask you some questions about what happened here today. Of course, Officer Murphy, Chief Jackson replied, his voice carrying just enough quiet authority that Murphy had to fight not to stand at attention. I'm happy to cooperate fully with your investigation. Linda's eyes narrowed at the easy familiarity between them, but she was too fired up to process what it might mean. Investigation, she snapped. What's to investigate? Just arrest him. He committed assault. He threatened children. Ma'am, Murphy interrupted. I need to get all the facts before I can make any decisions about arrests. That's when Brandon Mitchell decided to add fuel to the fire. This is such BS, he said, still filming. You cops probably don't even want to arrest him because you're scared of the lawsuit. Everyone knows you guys go easy on criminals these days. The entire store went silent. Murphy felt his jaw clench. Excuse me, son. But Brandon was on a roll now, emboldened by his audience of phone cameras and his absolute certainty in his family's righteousness. You heard me. This guy is obviously some kind of thug who thinks he can intimidate people in nice neighborhoods. But you're probably too politically correct to do anything about it. Chief Jackson finally spoke up. Brandon, he said quietly, and something in his voice made every person in that store stop breathing. I want you to think very carefully about the next words that come out of your mouth. Why should I listen to you? Brandon shot back. You're nobody. You're probably some gang member trying to scam people with a fake sob story. That's when Chief David Jackson decided the educational portion of the afternoon was officially over. He reached into his wallet and pulled out his badge. Brandon, he said, holding up the gold shield that identified him as chief of the Elmhurst Police Department, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise that right. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the parking lot. Linda's face went through a remarkable transformation, confusion melting into disbelief, disbelief collapsing into dawning horror, and finally settling into a desperate, panicked attempt at damage control that was almost painful to watch. That's impossible, she whispered. That has to be fake. Officer Murphy stepped forward, fighting back a smile. Ma'am, I can personally assure you that Chief Jackson's badge is very real. Chief, Linda's voice cracked like a teenager's. Chief David Jackson, Murphy confirmed, my boss. Everyone's boss, actually, if you want to get technical about it. Brandon had gone completely pale, his phone trembling in his hands as he continued recording what was rapidly becoming his family's most embarrassing moment. But you can't be, Brandon stammered, you don't look like. Like what? Chief Jackson asked mildly, like a police chief. What exactly do you think a police chief is supposed to look like, Brandon? The crowd of shoppers had grown to at least 50 people now, and every single one of them was recording. Someone in the back started clapping, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire store was applauding. Linda's face had gone from white to red to an alarming shade of purple. This is entrapment, she shrieked. You can't just walk around pretending to be a regular person and then arrest people for making honest mistakes. Ma'am. Chief Jackson said patiently, I wasn't pretending to be anything. I was shopping for wine for my anniversary dinner. Your son tried to steal my cart. You filed a false police report. Those are facts, not entrapment. We didn't know, Linda protested. How were we supposed to know? Chief Jackson studied her for a long moment. Ma'am, would it have mattered if I was a construction worker, a teacher, a janitor? Would my job title change whether or not it's okay for your son to take my groceries? The question hung in the air like a challenge. That's different, Linda said weakly. How? Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in the entire encounter, she seemed to realize that she didn't have an answer that wouldn't make everything worse. But Brandon apparently hadn't learned his lesson yet. This is such garbage, he said, still filming. You guys set us up. This is probably some kind of YouTube prank or something. There's no way this random black guy is actually a police chief. Chief Jackson turned to address the crowd of recording phones. Ladies and gentlemen, he said in his official police chief voice, I want everyone here to understand what just happened. A 17-year-old boy tried to steal my groceries because he assumed I couldn't afford them or didn't deserve them. When I stopped him, his mother immediately assumed I was the aggressor and called 911 to report a false crime. Now, when presented with evidence that their assumptions were wrong, instead of acknowledging their mistake, they're doubling down and claiming this is somehow a setup or a prank. He paused, looking directly into Brandon's phone camera. This is being recorded by multiple people from multiple angles. This will be reviewed by my department, by the district attorney's office, and probably by the mayor's office. So I want to be very clear about what happens next. Brandon Mitchell, you're under arrest for attempted theft and filing a false police report. Linda Mitchell, you're under arrest for filing a false police report, disturbing the peace and interfering with a police officer. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. But Chief Jackson wasn't done. However, he continued, and the store fell silent again. I'm going to offer you both a choice. You can accept these arrests, go through the system, and deal with the consequences. Or, he looked directly at Linda, then at Brandon. You can make a public apology, right here, right now on camera, acknowledging what you did wrong and committing to do better in the future. If you do that, and if I believe you're sincere, I'll let you go with a warning. Linda's mouth fell open. You'd do that? Community policing, Chief Jackson explained, is about education and rehabilitation, not just punishment. So yes, I'd do that, but the choice is yours, and you need to make it right now. What happened next became the most watched apology video in internet history. Linda looked around the store, at the 50+ people recording, at Officer Murphy standing ready to make arrests, at her son, who was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of their situation. She started, then stopped, visibly struggling with words. Chief Jackson waited patiently. I need to apologize, Linda finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, to you and to everyone here and to everyone who's going to see this video. The crowd fell completely silent. My son and we made assumptions today, horrible, wrong assumptions based on how you looked, how you dressed, where we thought you belonged. Her voice was shaking now. That was racist, that was wrong, and I'm sorry. She turned to address the cameras directly. I called 911 and filed a false report against an innocent man because I assumed that a black man in my store couldn't possibly be telling the truth about what happened. I assumed he was the problem because of his race. That's racism, and I was wrong. Brandon stepped forward, his phone finally lowered. I tried to take your groceries because I thought you didn't deserve them as much as I did, because of how you looked, because I thought I was more important than you. His voice cracked. That's messed up. That's really, really messed up, and I'm sorry. Chief Jackson studied them both for a long moment. Apology accepted, he said finally, but understanding your mistakes is just the first step. The question now is, what are you going to do differently going forward? Linda wiped her eyes. I need to educate myself about racism, about privilege, about how my actions affect other people. This can't happen again. And I need to volunteer, Brandon added, somewhere I can actually help people instead of assuming I'm better than them. Chief Jackson nodded. Good. Officer Murphy, please get their contact information. I want a report in 6 months about the volunteer work and education they've completed. If they follow through, we'll consider this matter closed. If they don't, we'll follow through, Linda said quickly. I promise. Chief Jackson turned to address the crowd one final time. I want everyone who posts these videos to include this message. Racism isn't just about using slurs or wearing hoods. It's about assumptions. It's about who you believe and who you don't. It's about who you think belongs and who you think doesn't. Today, 2 people made racist assumptions and then had the courage to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to doing better. That's how change happens, not through punishment and shame, but through honest conversation and genuine commitment to growth. The applause that followed was thunderous. By Sunday morning, Grocery store chief was trending on every social media platform. The videos, filmed from multiple angles by dozens of shoppers, had been viewed over 47 million times across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. But this wasn't just another Karen Gets Owned viral moment. The combination of Chief Jackson's measured response, the Mitchell family's genuine apologies, and the larger conversation about assumptions and racism had sparked something bigger. Major news networks picked up the story. The mayor held a press conference praising Chief Jackson's approach to community policing. The Mitchell family received thousands of supportive messages from people applauding their willingness to acknowledge their mistakes publicly, and Chief Jackson, he became an overnight sensation for all the right reasons. The Chief Jackson approach became a case study in police academies across the country. His decision to let the situation play out, to gather evidence, and then offer education instead of punishment was studied by law enforcement professionals, civil rights organizations, and community leaders nationwide. But perhaps most importantly, the video sparked millions of conversations about implicit bias, assumptions, and the small daily interactions that either perpetuate or challenge systemic racism. The comment sections became forums for people to share their own experiences with bias, both as victims and as people who realized they'd made unfair assumptions about others. True to their word, Linda and Brandon Mitchell followed through on their commitments. Linda completed a comprehensive course on racial bias and cultural competency at Northwestern University. She also began volunteering with the Chicago Urban League, helping other white women recognize and address their own unconscious biases. Brandon spent his summer volunteering at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, tutoring kids in math and helping organize youth sports leagues. By the end of the summer, he'd been offered a part-time job and had decided to study education in college. But the most remarkable part of their story was what happened when Chief Jackson agreed to meet with them again, 6 months after their grocery store encounter. The meeting, held at the Elmhurst Police Department, was recorded with everyone's permission and later released to the public. Chief Jackson, Linda said, sitting across from him in a conference room, "I want you to know that what happened that day was the best thing that could have happened to me. Not because getting called out was fun, but because it forced me to confront something about myself that I'd been ignoring for years." She pulled out her phone and showed him pictures from her volunteer work. "I've learned so much about myself, about the community, about the assumptions I didn't even realize I was making every single day. And I've made friends, real friends, with people I never would have talked to before because I was too caught up in my own little bubble." Brandon nodded. "The community center kids taught me more about respect and kindness than I learned in 17 years of private school. They didn't care what my dad did for work or what kind of car we drove. They just cared about whether I showed up and whether I cared about them." He paused. "I'm majoring in elementary education now. I want to teach in underserved communities. I want to make sure kids have better role models than I was." Chief Jackson smiled. "I'm proud of both of you. What you've done, the hard work of actually changing, not just apologizing, that's what real growth looks like." But then he got serious. "I want to share something with you both and with everyone who's going to see this video. That day in the grocery store wasn't just about your assumptions about me. It was about a much bigger problem in our society. Every day, people make assumptions about others based on race, class, age, appearance, accent, all kinds of surface characteristics, and most of the time, nothing dramatic happens. People just get treated a little worse, trusted a little less, given fewer opportunities. What made your situation different was that I had the power to do something about it." But for every grocery store incident that goes viral, there are thousands of daily interactions where people don't have that power, where the assumptions go unchallenged, where the bias just becomes part of the normal background noise of inequality. Linda wiped her eyes. "So what do we do about that?" "Exactly what you've been doing," Chief Jackson replied. "You recognize it, you educate yourself, you change your behavior, and you use your influence, because everyone has some influence, to help others recognize it too." He turned to address the camera directly. "The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. The goal is building a community where a black police chief can buy wine for his anniversary dinner without someone assuming he doesn't belong there. Where a teenager can't just demand another person's groceries because he thinks he matters more. Where calling 911 is reserved for actual emergencies, not for managing your discomfort with diversity." Brandon leaned forward. "Chief Jackson, can I ask you something? Why did you let it play out that day instead of just showing your badge right away?" Chief Jackson considered the question carefully. "Because I wanted you to learn something that you couldn't learn any other way. If I'd flashed my badge immediately, you would have backed down, but only because of my authority. You wouldn't have understood why what you did was wrong. You would have just learned to be more careful about who you try to bully. By letting it play out, you had to confront the full consequences of your assumptions. You had to see how your actions affected other people. You had to experience what it feels like when your certainty about the world turns out to be completely wrong." He smiled. "And look what happened. You didn't just learn to respect police officers. You learned to respect everyone. That's the kind of lesson that changes lives." 1 year after the grocery store incident, Chief Jackson was invited to speak at the annual Community Unity Day in Elmhurst, an event that had been started specifically in response to the viral video and the conversations it had sparked. The festival took place in the park across from Whole Foods, with food trucks representing dozens of different cultures, live music from local artists of all backgrounds, and information booths from organizations working on everything from bias education to community policing to youth mentorship. As Chief Jackson took the stage for his keynote address, he looked out at a crowd that truly represented his community, families of every background, teenagers volunteering at information booths, elderly residents chatting with recent immigrants, police officers playing basketball with local kids. A year ago, he began, I went to buy wine and accidentally started a national conversation about racism and assumptions. Today, I'm looking at a community that decided to turn one family's mistake into everyone's opportunity for growth. But the most important thing about this story isn't the viral video, the media attention, or even the policy changes that have come out of it. The most important thing is what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Linda and Brandon Mitchell made a choice to do the hard work of change. Our community made a choice to have difficult conversations instead of just moving on. And all of us made a choice to believe that people can grow, that mistakes can become lessons, and that accountability can lead to redemption. That's not always how these stories end. Usually, viral moments just become tomorrow's forgotten content. But sometimes, if we're willing to do the work, they become the beginning of something better. He paused, looking directly at the Mitchell family, who were volunteering at the community center information booth. I still shop at that Whole Foods every weekend. And you know what's different now? People say hello, they start conversations. They ask questions about community policing and share their own experiences with bias and assumption. A grocery store became a community center. A moment of conflict became an ongoing dialogue. A single incident became a movement for understanding. That's the power. We all have to turn our worst moments into our most important lessons, and to use those lessons to build something better for everyone. The applause was long and heartfelt, but Chief Jackson wasn't quite finished. I want to end with a challenge for everyone here and everyone who sees this video online. The next time you find yourself making assumptions about someone based on how they look, where they shop, what they drive, or any other surface characteristic, pause. Ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What if this person's story is completely different from what I think it is? What if treating them with respect and dignity costs me nothing but could mean everything to them? And if you find yourself in a situation like the one Brandon and Linda were in, where you realize you've made a mistake, where you've let bias influence your actions, remember that the story doesn't have to end there. Acknowledgement is the first step, education is the second, change behavior is the third, and helping others learn from your experience is the fourth. That's how we build the kind of community where everyone belongs, where everyone is treated with dignity, and where a trip to the grocery store is just a trip to the grocery store, not an opportunity for assumptions, not a test of who deserves to be there, just neighbors sharing the same space and treating each other with basic human respect. As Chief Jackson left the stage, he was approached by a young black boy, maybe 8 years old, who'd been watching from the front row with his parents. Mr. Police Chief, the boy said shyly, I want to be a police officer when I grow up, like you. Chief Jackson knelt down to the boy's eye level. What's your name, son? Marcus. Well, Marcus, if you decide to become a police officer, remember the most important part of the job isn't the badge or the uniform or the authority. It's using whatever power you have to make your community better for everyone who lives in it. Marcus nodded solemnly. Even people who make mistakes. Especially people who make mistakes, Chief Jackson replied, because that's when they need the most help learning to do better. As Marcus ran back to his parents, Chief Jackson thought about that Saturday afternoon in the wine aisle, when he'd made the split-second decision to let a teachable moment play out instead of ending it with a badge flash. It had been the right call, not just for the Mitchell family, not just for his department, but for an entire community that had decided to turn conflict into conversation and assumptions into understanding. And it all started because he'd run out of time to shop for anniversary wine. Funny how the world works sometimes. Chief David Jackson continues to serve as Elmhurst's police chief, where his community policing approach has reduced complaints against officers by 60% while increasing community trust ratings to historic highs. He's written a book about bias-free policing that's become required reading at police academies nationwide. He and his wife Sarah celebrated their 26th anniversary last month. With the same bottle of wine he finally bought that day, Linda Mitchell completed her cultural competency program and now leads bias education workshops for corporate clients across the Chicago area. She's become a sought-after speaker on the topic of acknowledging and addressing unconscious bias. Her marriage to her husband Richard, who supported her throughout her learning process, is stronger than ever. Brandon Mitchell graduated as valedictorian of his high school class and is currently studying elementary education at Northwestern University. He spends his summers working at the same South Side Community Center where he first volunteered. The kids there call him Mr. Brandon, and several have said they want to be teachers because of his influence. Officer Kevin Murphy was promoted to sergeant and now leads the department's community engagement unit. He credits the grocery store incident with teaching him the value of patience and de-escalation in community policing. The Elmhurst community has become a model for police community relations with regular town halls, youth mentorship programs, and bias education initiatives. Property values have actually increased as the community has become known as a place where diversity is celebrated and inclusion is prioritized. The Whole Foods on York Road installed a plaque near the wine section commemorating the day assumptions became understanding. The store reports that the viral attention actually increased business as people from across the region come to shop where that incredible thing happened. And the wine that started it all. Chief Jackson finally made it home with the bottle that night, about 3 hours later than planned. Sarah said it was the best anniversary dinner they'd ever had, not because of the wine, but because of the story that came with it. She still teases him about being internet famous for grocery shopping. This went viral because it gives us something we desperately need: proof that justice can be served, that people can change, and that communities can come together to demand better from each other. But the real power isn't in the gotcha moment when Chief Jackson reveals his badge. It's in what happened next. The genuine apologies, the real education, the long-term commitment to growth, and the proof that accountability doesn't have to mean destruction. We live in a world where viral moments usually end in shame spirals and canceled lives. The Mitchell family story shows us a different path. One where mistakes become learning opportunities, where conflict becomes conversation, and where the worst thing you've ever done publicly becomes the first step toward becoming a better person. Chief Jackson didn't just arrest 2 people for bias and false reporting. He created a template for how communities can address racism and assumption, not through punishment and exile, but through education, accountability, and genuine commitment to change. That's not always how these stories end. But when they do, it's because someone in power chose education over retribution, growth over punishment, and hope over cynicism. Chief Jackson went grocery shopping and accidentally taught a masterclass in community policing. Linda and Brandon Mitchell made terrible assumptions and turned them into a public commitment to do better. An entire community decided that one family's mistake could become everyone's opportunity to grow. That's not just viral content. That's social change. If this story restored your faith in second chances, share this. If you believe people can learn from their mistakes, comment your thoughts. Should Chief Jackson have revealed his identity immediately, or was letting it play out the right call? What would you have done in Chief Jackson's position? Would you have ended it immediately with a badge flash or let the teachings